Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Moses and you are listening to the AHP Leader podcast special. I'm going to introduce the panel today who have agreed to come and speak on this AHP LGBTQIA+ Pride 2020 podcast special. So I'm going to start with Darren.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Darren Brown. I'm a physiotherapist. I specialise in rehabilitation for people living with HIV. I live in London in the UK and I work at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. I am a gay white man and I go by pronouns he and him.
And if we come to Tom, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Thomas Ince. I am a AHP clinical manager in intermediate care at Guy's and St Thomas's. I am a gay man living in London and I use the pronouns he and him. Thank you, Rachel, for including me.
Thank you. And if we come now to Laura.
Hi, my name's Laura. I'm a respiratory physio at Guy's and St Thomas's in London. I identify as a lesbian woman and my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you. CK.
Hey, I'm CK. One of my jobs is a diagnostic radiographer, bank and agency. I also teach yoga and write. I'm an artist. I identify as non-binary, transgender, queer, and my pronouns are they, them.
Thank you, CK. Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Nerva. I'm a community mental health occupational therapist and I work for Central and Northwest London, CNWL. I'm a lesbian woman living in London and go by the pronouns she and her.
Thank you. Martin.
Hello, I'm Martin Smith. I'm a student physiotherapist at the University of Brighton, currently in my second year. I'm a white gay male and I identify, pronouns he and him.
Thank you. And John.
And I'm John Hammond and I work at St George's University of London and I identify as a gay queer male identified and my pronouns are he, him, but also I don't mind they, them.
Thank you everyone, and my name is Rachel Moses and I am currently an AHP Associate Director of Rehabilitation Therapies at the Royal Brompton Hospital in London. I identify as pansexual and I have pronouns her/she. So I just want to say a massive thank you first to the panel because we have done a series of podcasts on different issues lately, and for those of you that aren't aware, this is Pride Month. And normally Pride Month is a fantastic part of our calendar in terms of celebrating diversity across the LGBTQIA+ community. And obviously in the light of recent events, the celebrations have quite rightly not taken place in the full entirety with COVID-19 and Black Lives Matters. So what we wanted to do was still have something that could discuss some of the challenges that exist within the NHS and within workplaces and within education, universities, within our community, and how we can reach out to people who may be going through some of them challenges, but also to our allies on what might be needed in terms of support, particularly in management roles, to colleagues, and to really increase awareness and have this open and honest conversation. And we can't do that without the brilliant diverse panel we have today, so thank you. So for those of you that maybe don't know much about LGBTQIA+ awareness, we currently make up about 2 to 5% of the population of the UK, but sadly still experience high levels of discrimination in the workplace, and we know that from various reports that I'll reference at the bottom of this podcast. In surveys, for example, from the TUC or the government, or from a company called Stonewall, which I'll reference throughout. Within the NHS specifically, there's been many strategies to improve awareness and action on LGBTQIA+ rights and issues, and especially on the integration of sexual orientation and gender identity more specifically over the last couple of years. And we know that employers need to increase their awareness because we need to make sure staff feel valued for who they are and respected for who they are. And the effects of not achieving that can be absolutely huge, not just on a person's health and well-being, but actually on team dynamics, about productivity in organisations as a whole. So it's really important we continue to raise awareness and really improve, you know, our understanding of the challenges that exist and what we need to do, not just as a community, but as a leadership teams of colleagues, as friends and as allies. One of the things that really shocked me actually was when I was getting a panel together for this podcast, which sometimes can be challenging depending on the topic area. There was a huge amount of people that felt like they didn't have the confidence to disclose and identify within their sexual orientation or gender, and speak so openly about it on camera. And that actually really saddened me, but actually gave me more motivation to have this conversation in this safe space. And therefore, I'm very grateful to some of the people who have confidentially given me information they want to discuss and they want referenced in terms of the extent of the discrimination they have received in their workplace within the NHS, potentially with people that, you know, you may work with, and how that impacts on a person and why this needs to be on the agenda and why this is important and why we need to talk about it. So I'm going to start with some questions that I'll aim at the panel. So I'll hope for some volunteers that'll take them forward. But just to start with, I want maybe come to you, John, and talk to us about why discrimination even exists for LGBTQIA+ staff. Like, why in 2020 do we need to have this conversation at all?
Thank you, Rachel. Well, I think one of the significant issues is that actually we live in a world where we kind of have things in society where we kind of measure ourselves against. And one of those is kind of things that are normal things in society. So heteronormative kind of values are quite normal, what people see as the kind of norm or the default. And so anything outside of that is a default, or sorry, is not the default, is other, is different. And so as part of people's conversation, they kind of slip into, oh, so who's your partner then? Oh, how is she? You know, those sorts of things. So that kind of slips into that. So I'm not just saying heteronormative, but I know my colleagues have pointed out too, it's about gender too. And I suppose we get into this kind of problem about binaries, where you either are or you aren't, rather than being somewhere on a continuum, which I would like to kind of think. And so until we get more people on that continuum, discrimination will exist.
Absolutely. CK, can I come to you, please?
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, we're very much living in a system, which is a system, CISTEM. So it's male and female, and it's come around about we need to break out of the binary, and people maybe just need to have a little bit of a better understanding that there is more than two genders on the binary. And LGBTQIA+ have always been in the bunny ears minority. So with that, we have been othered, as John has said. And even within computer systems, etc., there's always male or female or other. There is no breakdown of the binary within that as well, in your own choice and in what others perceive you to be. And I think it also brings a level of conscious awareness into when you are speaking and having dialogue with someone, to not just judgmentally perceive someone as you perceive them to be. Maybe stop and ask, you know, what are your pronouns? Who, you know, do you have a partner? You know, not to just them preconceptions that have been habitual for years and years and years, and they're just biases that people have come to believe over a period of time. So it's generational, it's cultural and societal conditioning that just needs to be stripped back. And I think awareness is key.
Do you know, I think for me, John hit the nail on the head a little bit. It's just like normal is safe. And if you presume normal all the time, you can't get it wrong. And what I find a lot of people who aren't as confident with their own sexuality or gender identity, or even know their gender identity, then it's quite a thing to come back and say, well, actually, you know, I don't, and my partner is female or male, or, and I think that can feel awkward, and it's sometimes for the person who, you know, say your lesbian woman coming back saying, well, actually they don't want to put that other person in that uncomfortable position. So it very much becomes the default sometimes to say nothing when the confidence isn't there, and it's how we can create that confidence for it to be a much more open conversation. Something that someone actually came to me and said, why don't I disclose at the workplace? I'm in a very senior AHP leadership position. I often ask myself why my colleagues, I've been in a gay relationship for 7 years, and I don't disclose that to my colleagues. And she said because she just doesn't want to make anyone feel awkward about it and change the perception of her. So I think, I don't know if anyone wants to elaborate on that in terms of how that can make a person feel. So Sarah, I'll come to you first, then Tom, thanks.
Thank you ever so much. This is so good. I really echo on those points. And I very much speak about that myself from experience when I reflect back when I was a student a few years back, and I was very much in the sense coming out into the LGBTQI plus community, and feeling quite anxious when I was out on placements, and that fear of just I'm only on placement for 2 months. I want to get the best grade. I want to perform my best, and don't want it to affect the way I'm treated, I'm assumed when out there. And I think it's exactly the same again when in the workplace. And it's going similar to those points when people say, so how was your weekend? What's his name? Your other half? And it's then saying, it's actually a woman, their name is X. And then their like facial expression sort of drops, and there's like a awkward moment of silence, and can put both of you in an awkward position, or it can be, didn't really matter, won't make the mistake again. And I think around sexuality and gender, you should never assume where somebody is on their journey and where they are. They might be early on. I'm really looking for somebody within the workplace, whether that's an ally, a member of the community, for some support, because that might be their main support as opposed to somebody in their personal life.
Thank you, Sarah. Tom?
Hi. So I was just listening to the conversation. I was reflecting back on my own career in work and in personal life. And I think for me, especially when I was out on placement, I would have an understanding that people might assume that I was gay, and I would think that might be awkward for other people. I think, you know, my voice might sound a bit stereotypically what people would think of as a gay man. So, and I think when I became a little bit more confident, I might try and slip in somewhere, oh, me and my boyfriend did this, before anyone had a chance to ask me whether I had a partner or whether there was anything personal, so that I didn't have to then go into a long conversation about my own personal life and whether I was a gay man or not. And I think as I've become more confident, I've become a bit more overtly gay at work, in terms of I'm a proud gay man at work. I don't try and hide it or try and gloss over it. I'm prouder of it, I celebrate it, and I hope that provides reassurance for other people that they can do the same in their workplace.
Thank you, Tom. Darren, coming to you.
Hi. I wanted to come back to something that both John and CK referenced. I really loved what you said, CK, about the system. It made me think about, we are all creatures that are socialized by the social environments we're in. And we have to accept that we're socialized by the environments that we're surrounded by. And the societies that we're surrounded by are heteronormative or cisnormative. We all grow up with these accepted norms. And the stories that were just told there by Tom and Sarah about having to constantly come out, navigate your experience, check your safety, those things are about how we have to go against the socialized experiences that we grow up in and are told are normal.
Absolutely. CK, I'll come to you then, Martin.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, as well, I think before, you know, I would have come out living in rural Ireland and then coming out when I was in my late teen, when I moved over to England to study. But, you know, I feel that we play it small before we come out. And then when we come out, and at times there's discomfort, so it's easy for us to play small again because we don't feel comfortable in who we are telling others. And I think we're not actually living to our full potential if we're constantly playing small. So when I come out within my pronouns of they and them and my gender identity as non-binary transgender, people would say to me, oh, I'm having real trouble with your pronouns. Like, I'm sorry, I'm just having real trouble with them. Or I'll never get they and them. It's just something I won't be able to get that. In the beginning, I thought, oh, you know, again, I'll make other people comfortable. I'll just be accepting of that. And I began to realize that isn't my problem. So I'm very much like, these are my pronouns. Can you please respect that that's my choice? And these are my pronouns, and that's where I'm at, you know. But again, taking it back to that system, the cisnormative and heteronormative, you know, it's not on computer systems, etc. yet, because the Gender Recognition Act hasn't actually been still in the process of being put forward to the reforms to it. So, which is still a process. But I do think we're not here to make people comfortable, but there has to be a level of acceptance within our workplaces and within our teams and within the wider community, that we do exist and we're not just existing despite not being included within this system.
Absolutely, and we're definitely going to come back to that point as well, CK. Martin, can I come to you? Thanks.
Yeah, I think I was going to pick up from what Sarah and Tom were saying about placements. And I think when you're a student, especially some of the school leavers, they're still finding themselves at 19 years old. And then you're going into a workplace where you get constantly judged coming from university, which is very much more accepting, and it can be quite a culture shock, I think. And I think it's something that we sort of need to take the culture that comes from university, where everyone's so accepting and so open, to be able to take that into the workplace. Because, I mean, I'm 29 and I have my first placement this year, and it took me 3 weeks to come out on placement, purely because I had the same worry that Sarah was saying, that I felt personally that I would get marked down. And I feel that from and I hear it from a lot of students as well saying it. And I was like, that's the reason I needed to do it. I was like, look, you should be doing this. We should be doing this. And we should feel comfortable to be able to do it. And we shouldn't feel that we're going to be judged or anything on marks wise on a placement when we're already so out of our comfort zone, so overwhelmed. It's a big sort of journey to be on, and taking the sort of being gay on that journey as an extra sort of thing is such a struggle for some people. And I think that's why we see a lot of the sort of mental health concerns around the sort of LGBTQIA students. I think that's why it's there, and I think it's something that needs to be recognised. And thank you so much, Rachel, for setting this up.
No, I think that's a really valuable point, and I think there's a lot more pressure on younger people now. I mean, this is a whole different podcast altogether almost, but I think there's huge pressure to identify earlier, like earlier than ever before. And I think there's they're putting labels on things, and I think there is, you're absolutely right, people come into you know, AHP postgraduate training, undergraduate training at multiple stages now in their life. It's not just school leavers anymore, but, you know, like we've referred to already, this is a continuum, this is a spectrum. There is not, you don't have to make a decision when you're 16 years old and stick to it forever. So that's a really important point to get across, and the challenges that students have anyway with integration when you're in a minority group, or you feel you're in an exclusion group, or you even just don't even know where you sit. There needs to be recognition of that. John, do you have anything to add from that, from obviously your experience in academia and education?
Yes, I hear that a lot, Martin, about your experience moving into practice and about that. And I think it is really important that actually universities, demonstrate that they're supporting students through that, so they've got an ally. That there is not just their other colleagues as students, but also there's people at the university that value and believe them for who they are. But also we need to do more about curriculum. so that actually some of those conversations are not just in the canteen, but they're in the classroom. And that's really important, so that it feels it's valued and validated about LGBTQIA+ experiences. And so I think as universities we have a duty to really think about how we do that in a safe environment, and exploring different kind of methods to do that help students to kind of reveal, probably that's the wrong word actually, to talk about their experience and who they are, and to feel comfortable about that. And also to think about how that relates when they're going to be working with colleagues, but also with patients. Because what I hear is the biggest problem is when they're faced with patients and worrying about what they might be perceived. But maybe that's from my experience as well.
No, I've had quite a few messages about that as well, and I can give some pretty harrowing stories actually, that people, real life experience, people even up to this moment in time have experienced from patients, and the default is to remove that person from that patient situation and put someone else in it, which is not the right thing, but people think they're protecting that person, and it's but again that we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about strategies. Sarah, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, just want to come in around what John was saying around that point, and I think that's as we as like allied health professionals, and what we're trying to work with our clients, our service users, patients around, and that holistic care and that sense of like therapeutic use of self as a therapist can really be compromised when you don't really feel safe going out to that person's home environment, but you might be the only member of the team, the only person in that day, so that person has to be seen, but then you're sort of potentially could be compromising your safety, and that use of the therapeutic relationship just isn't there.
Can I just add, and that when you look at our HCPC code of conduct, it's kind of stated that we should not be discriminatory in our practice, that if you're feeling unsafe about something like that, then you're interpreted as being discriminatory if you feel that you raise a concern. So it's a real tension, isn't it, about how we deal with that?
Yeah, completely. So that kind of brings that whole conversation there has just answered slightly the next question a little bit, and we've touched on this about staff and colleagues revealing or disclosing their sexual orientation at work, and there is many reasons why people don't feel comfortable about that, and there's many reasons why people want to do it but feel they can't. So we've touched on a couple of them, but does anyone want to elaborate? I mean, if I can give an example of someone that reached out, she's an Asian occupational therapist, and this is within the last 18 months in a London hospital. She's very happy for me to share that. She, after 2 years of being asked if she had a boyfriend, disclosed her sexual orientation on a night out in a bar. And from that moment, she said the relationship between her and her colleagues was completely different, and she was discriminated against, not just by traditional white heterosexual, but also some of her Indian male colleagues as well. And she describes that as being, you know, she was from a mental health wellbeing perspective, that really traumatized her to the point she left her job. And she wanted to share that in terms of that the realism does exist. And she then, in her next job, promised she would disclose it much earlier, so she never had to go through that, and she still hasn't. And she still now doesn't quite know why she doesn't feel confident enough to share and disclose such a massively important part of her life when she's been with her partner for many, many years. So does anyone want to kind of elaborate, talk about anything like that? Maybe some strategies they've come up with to help manage that, CK?
Well, before the strategies, I'll just give you one of my experiences. About 5 years ago, I moved from one department to another department, and on going into that department, I just could feel it was very just heteronormative. So I just didn't really feel like I had to disclose my sexuality at the time. But about 6 months in, I disclosed it, and at that time, I identified as being, because I was female at the time, I was still exploring my gender identity. As now I'm non-binary transgender, so my pronouns at the time were she, her. And I was very close to an Asian girl, and we were very, very friendly, and we were thinking of just moving in together. And one of my other colleagues said to her, "Oh, how would you feel about living with CK though, because she's a lesbian?" And my friend came back and told me this, and it was such a small team as well, and it ended up, there was a few other comments made against gay patients, so I took it very, very, very high within a hospital, and to no avail. They just said they didn't have enough proof, they didn't have enough witnesses. There were certain comments made against gay HIV patients by this one particular member of staff as well. And I rapidly left that team, and I had to come back to the other team I was in, where I was comfortable and safe to be myself, you know, and still see those people around the hospital before I finally left that hospital. I won't disclose the hospital I was in at the time, but yeah, I did. I took it as far as I could go, but the support wasn't there, and the legislation within the support, you know, they wanted more proof, they wanted more evidence, etc. And for me, it was shocking that it could be said within a member of staff as also treating queer patients as well at the time, you know. So yeah, it was just very disruptive. It was very disheartening. It was very saddening, to be honest. And I think impact it had on me then was, again, when you move somewhere else, is that you're trying to confide in your colleagues to come out in your gender and your sexuality, you know. But I think we grow in discomfort at times, so it's made me more resilient and stronger in who I am today, which I'm very grateful for that aspect of it. But at least I can say I took it as far as I could with it, but unfortunately nothing came of it. So, yeah.
I mean, to reassure those people out there, within NHS organisations, we have the Equality Act, you know, that does protect staff from discrimination. Trusts have to have equality and diversity boards and officers, and the best departments I've worked in they'll have an AHP, equality and diversity board or board member. They'll also have, you know, networks across BAME, LGBTQ, so that there'll be all those different ways that you can escalate as a community and as a team, rather than just feeling like you're alone. And if you haven't got some of those support networks within your organisations, it's a great opportunity to start one, and you could reach out, I'm sure, to any of the panel members, and I can link in with people if you work in an organisation that just has that horrific kind of culture and you need something to jumpstart it. John, do you want to come in there?
I just wanted to add to that, and I think you asked about strategies, and I think that story resonates with a lot of us in terms of that, you know, finding the place and the time, and how do you do it. So I want to just sort of say that experience is normal. No, I shouldn't say normal. Actually, that experience, they shouldn't feel problematic, and they should find their own way through that journey. But I would say that actually always coming out feels like a cliff edge. And rather than it feeling like a cliff edge, maybe try and think of baby steps, or think of steps towards that. So it may be finding an ally, listening for some sort of resonance within the community, to hear for something, and maybe talk about that with one person first before you think about it being the whole team, because that's the kind of cliff edge, isn't it, in terms of that story. That's all I have to say.
And, you know, the statistic shows that. So in the last big national survey in 2017, showed 56% were not, of LGBTQI workforce staff were not comfortable about disclosing sexual orientation at work. And 26 to 30% of that was because of the impact it was have on their career. In terms of promotion, and we know that from some of the Stonewall work in terms of chief execs and managers. So we have the evidence there. And in terms of when people were happy to disclose, which I'm always fascinated by this statistic, of the small minority of people that do disclose, 87% of lesbians, 73% of gay, while only 41% are bisexual and 39% in the other category. So again, this relates to kind of role modeling and reasons why. So there is even a different, you know, we'll talk about the umbrella term, but there's individual needs and characteristics within each of those populations. And I think it's really important to recognise that we're individuals, and there's an individual spectrum within each one, because we sometimes can get clumped together. Darren, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, I want to echo what John said about you sharing your story, CK, and it really resonated. And I wondered if it would be okay if I could share a personal experience briefly as well. And it goes back to the student stuff, because you mentioned about how you had growth from adversity. And I had some experiences at university that I classify as adversity. My first degree was in anatomy. I was in halls at the University of Bristol, and I had phone calls in the middle of the night from my apparent peers telling me I was going to die of AIDS because I was gay. And that repeatedly happened. And I took it to the dean of the university, and nothing happened. At my undergraduate physiotherapy course, I was told in my final appraisal of my very last student placement that I was inappropriately behaving because of my sexuality, because I was laughing with the other gay man on the team and I was open about my sexuality. And I called it out as homophobia, and I was told, be careful, I'm marking you. I decided from that point, oh, I'm not letting you get this. And so I rose from that adversity, and my first ever job as a baby physiotherapist, within 1 month, it was Christmas time and they were doing a Christmas party. And I said, I volunteered to do the entertainment, and I turned up in drag. And I was not having it that I wasn't open. And I was there in a mini skirt and like literal bunches. Yes. And I was doing it, and I was out, and I was proud. And since that point, I've been so goddamn vocal about my sexuality, and I wear it on every bit of me, and I'm so open about it. And I am as a strategy. Last night, I was on call. I still haven't been home. And last night, I'm so open about my sexuality with everyone around me. I was quite shocked. And last night, the cleaner, who's new, opened up about her personal experiences as a lesbian, and also some traumatic experiences she had had, because I mentioned that I was on the phone to my boyfriend. And then she's telling me about really personal experiences. That was because she maybe heard someone talk about something that related to her life. And she actually said, I've never told anyone that before. And I thought, wow, how important is it that we are visible? It doesn't mean we can all be visible, and we can't all be safe with our visibility. But for me, I try to be as visible as I can, because I do feel safe in my visibility, and I want to be as visible as possible as a strategy.
That's so inspirational, Darren. So many people will take stuff from that. CK.
Thanks a million, Darren. Love that. But that's, I have to say, and you do you, boo, you know, and I definitely think it's helped me then with my activism and my writing, and helping other young trans kids coming forward, and other representatives of the LGBTQIA+ community, and trans people who maybe are transition, etc., to be able to represent them, having experienced what we've experienced. So again, going back to what Darren said, when you grow through it, you know, and I think that visible representation and understanding is very reflective in the workplace. And when you have, you know, peers that like Darren that you can approach and speak to about various things, then people will be able to feel supported within their department as well.
Absolutely. Laura, can I come down to you?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to, obviously, amazing story, Darren, as well. It's fantastic. Just wanted to kind of add, in terms of kind of, you know, why people might not want to reveal their sexual orientation at work, just kind of the, you know, like we were saying, everyone is somewhere on a journey and on a spectrum and on a different point in their lives. And there's absolutely no way, I've been working 10 years, I couldn't have done this 5 years ago, you know, and just because someone isn't at a certain point, you know, now, you know, it doesn't kind of take away from the fact that, you know, you keep growing, you keep learning as a person and experience things in your personal life that maybe will influence you at other points to be more vocal and to be more kind of out with who you are, and kind of just taking the time to do that and to acknowledge that, and not feeling that you have to be really vocal like at different points. I know it's not what you were trying to say at all, Darren. That's not. Yeah, we can't all be drag queens, but yeah, just kind of recognizing that part of that journey at different times will mean that how out you are might vary.
So Laura, just to pick up on that and have a little conversation, one of my things is about labeling, and sometimes label we choose to describe like orientation, or how we describe things to other people, but they really can only be determined like by ourselves and our experiences, and a lot of the time it's related to attraction, or it's related to romance, or sometimes just sexual attraction. But people should not be defined by like their partner's gender. And I think a lot of the time in like everything you were saying, John, it's about that's why they often want to know, how have you got a partner? You know, even people now just saying have you got a partner, they think they're being very inclusive by not saying have you got a boyfriend or have you got a girlfriend. So I think that adds to some of the complexity, doesn't it, Laura, about maybe the understanding and just how confident people are about just picking a side. Have you picked a man or have you picked a female?
Yeah. And I think there's a temptation in that to kind of, like you were saying a little bit before, about kind of being like a bit of pressure to pick a label, because it does make people more comfortable if we can all be in a nice neat box that they can understand, and you're this and you're always going to be this, so I know what you're going to do and I understand that. But yeah, it's trying to just kind of make the point over and over again that that's not life and that's not sexuality and that's not any of us. And you know, it's kind of absolutely agree, like, yeah, and you might have different labels at different times, and it's never going to be a fixed thing that you have to, you know, pick your team and stick with it.
Fabulous. So has anyone got any great examples of some inclusive positive initiatives or policies that they've seen within an organisation or they have within their organisation? So Sarah, we were talking in for those of you that don't know, Stonewall do a top 100 employer inclusivity every year, and the top hospital is rated, it's in the top 20, it's 12 or 16 or something, and it's Central and Northwest London NHS Foundation Trust. And Sarah, you're just showing us there.
Yeah, so I'm an employee at CNWL, and on every like trust induction, you get one of these booklets, and it's a rainbow lanyard booklet, which basically is around what the trust offers for members of the community, ally members, and loads of support organisations, from BAME organisations, more religious ones, so different age groups, and trying to make you feel welcomed into the organisation, and also coming around on open days. And I think it's just such a good resource and a way of trying to increase the inclusivity within the workforce and to showcase the diversity.
Excellent. And interestingly, in the top 100, I think there's only 2 NHS organisations, one of which is Joint 40th, which is the Newcastle upon Tyne Foundation stuff. So I think there's a lot in that, and there's a lot to learn. We're a massive combined organisation in terms of the National Health Service, especially for include social care. So, and actually city councils and a lot of universities are up there. So I think maybe as an NHS organisation, and maybe this is something that we need to push and lobby for, that we'll look outside of our own organisations and look what is great elsewhere. So for any of you that are working in an organisation that lacks anything proactive, then maybe check out Sarah's trust, who, you know, it speaks volumes. So why is it important? Oh, John, I'll come to you.
Just picking up on the lanyards, I think the lanyards are really good.
Yeah.
And one thing we're doing in our organisation, although we're stalled a bit right now because of COVID, is we were doing a rolling programme of a different lanyard released every year. So this year was the trans lanyard. So it was the trans flag in a lanyard. So because it's new, it's a new conversation. So it becomes something as an annual thing that we talk about in a different way. So that's something that people are kind of, you know, just following on from that as another positive action.
I love that. Darren?
I've just done a really quick Google search because I didn't know the answer. I wanted to look up the answer to how many trusts had adopted the Nhs Rainbow Badge, and apparently it's 6 in 10 trusts.
Very good.
That's quite astonishing. I think that's really good. And if anyone doesn't know what the Nhs Rainbow Badges are, they're a tiny little badge, and you wear them to identify that you are a safe person to talk to about LGBTIQA plus issues.
Oh, yeah.
There it is!
And they really, really work, not just for staff and colleagues, for patients as well. So it's a focal talking point. So thanks for that, Darren.
Do you wear yours all the time, Laura?
Yes, yeah.
I wear mine all the time.
I had my lanyard on and off a bit recently with infection control, but when I can wear my lanyard, yeah. I think just to just mention something else about that as well is like the other thing that is a big part of it is that it's not just a symbol on its own or a token gesture, and it does come with a whole kind of, you know, getting people to sign pledges or kind of education around it, and making sure that people who are wearing it know what it means, and that, yeah, it's not just kind of, you know, a thing that people sort of feel like they have to do so they can show that they're kind of okay with everyone. And, you know, it actually kind of does, trying to get things to represent, you know, a real kind of commitment to inclusivity.
Yeah, absolutely. So why is it important these types of strategies and things exist within an organisation? And again, people who are maybe struggling within theirs to look out for these things. Well, I mean, this might seem like a really simple question, but why is it important? Why do I have to make sure we're talking about challenges, we're talking about issues, we're raising awareness? And whose responsibility is it? Is it organisations? Is it the manager? Is it centrally? Is it staff? Is it LGBTQIA plus community? Is whose responsibility is it? Tom, why don't I come to you for that as the manager?
I was trying to think of an answer because I thought you might come to me. I guess from my point of view, I think everyone has a part to play in promoting these issues, and I definitely see it as my role to. So if I disclose something that I'm a gay man, I hope that will show me as being a vulnerable manager, and actually that might create safety within the team for other people to reveal their stories and allow them to become more vulnerable. I also think, so from a manager's point of view, diversity in your workforce, I think this is evidence-based, but I'm not sure. I think it makes for a productive workforce. And people who feel safe within their teams are more likely to stay within their teams. I was really inspired by a few of the stories I heard, and it makes me want to go out there and push the agenda further forwards. But yeah, so I think the manager does have responsibility, especially around if there was a patient there was discrimination there. I want to create education and awareness for that patient, and I would not change the therapist that was going to see them, and I would support that therapist as long as they felt comfortable and it was appropriate to do so, because patients can't discriminate and choose who their physiotherapist or occupational therapist or other allied health professional just based on their sexual orientation or their race. They don't have that choice to make that decision. I think we need to continue to create that awareness.
Absolutely. John?
I was just going to add to your point there, Tom, about diversity makes more greater productivity. In fact, I have read an article about this. In fact, it doesn't increase productivity. It does increase innovation and creativity, but not necessarily productivity, because it takes a longer time to have all the different perspectives. But in the end, it's still kind of better to have that.
Yeah.
Darren?
I think it's a really difficult question. And I've been ruminating on this as people have been speaking. And one of the things I was thinking is about the themes that have come up in this around society, normativity, disclosure, don't love that word, but we know what it means, and coming out repeatedly and continuously. And one of the things I was thinking about is that process in itself occupies so much emotional and intellectual space. And the fact that when there is something that is LGBTIQA plus visibility, it can just remove some of that occupied space and enable people to maybe be a bit more comfortable. So something as simple as that rainbow badge could help us, could help our colleagues, could help our patients just free up a bit of that space.
Absolutely. CK, can I come down to you?
Yeah, exactly. I think there needs to be the representation on our teams, but it needs to come from the training aspect of those who are coming in with their equality and diversity training as well, to better understand that there will be diverse members on their team that, you know, they need to accept that are there and for who they are. And then that will shine outwardly onto the patients too that are coming to be treated by the individual trusts as well, you know. And I think, yeah, echoing what Darren said, you know, I personally don't like the term safe spaces, because, you know, we shouldn't have to feel that we have to feel safe. It should be integrative spaces, you know. I feel that, you know, LGBTQIA plus hate crime is on the rise in London. Like, I'm from one of the most transphobic and homophobic places in Western Europe, and I think, yes, safety is huge, but I think it's shocking in 2020 that we still have to feel like that within the workplace and be able to approach people who are safe or be in teams that feel safe, you know. And I think the awareness will come from the organisation, but also the team members, and then equally just keep an eye on each other as well, you know.
Yeah, I like that. Martin, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I think everyone has a responsibility for this, and I think it's really difficult. I think part of it should come from us, purely because I think we know best how to deal with this. I think some of the allies are brilliant, but they don't understand how we feel in certain situations, and I think we need to lead with how we feel and then let them empathise with that and then take that forwards. But I also think, on the other fact, I think government has something quite big to do with this as well, just to change society as a whole. I mean, something big that's changed over the last few years was the Equal Marriage Bill, and I think that's changed a lot of perceptions and it's allowed more of a development, but I think that still needs to carry on further from there. So I think there's quite ends of the spectrum, but I think it's a very complex answer, but I think the answer is everyone has a responsibility to this, and it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a challenge worth it.
John?
I agree with all of that. I think it is everyone's responsibility, but I also think that actually it's easy when you say it's everyone's responsibility, because senior management, organisations can easily go, well, everyone's responsible, and they don't take ownership. So I think we need to lobby at organisational levels to say, what are senior management doing about this? What is, you know, keep lobbying for that within organisations, so that there is some allies who are supporting this. So it doesn't just come down to the LGBT network in an organisation to organise an event. There has to be something systematic through the organisation that is also by allies. It is also organised through the organisation, so it's implicit, not because I've hosted many LGBT events at St George's, and the minute you put LGBT on it, then people only think it's for the LGBT community. It has to be put on by an institution or an organisation to get momentum. I think that's something I would say. I know it's important for everyone to be to do that, but I think we need to kind of lobby.
No, that's true. I mean, in management, you say as soon as anything's everyone's responsibility, it becomes nobody's responsibility. So that in management, that's a term, you know, we're coining. I think for me, you've hit going back to what's there to protect and guide us in terms of the Equality Act is like over 10 years old, the Gender Recognition Act over 15 years old or something like that. Civil partnership, there's the Marriage Act. It's like there's so many things now that are so dated in terms of, and yet how we've progressed and how we use them. So I do think, John, we'll have to do things a little bit different as a community, but also bringing everyone together and thinking about different ways we can bounce off each other and maybe different strategies. And I love the idea, CK, of not referring to it as a safe place, as an integrated place, or as an inclusive place. I think that with the language we use sometimes maybe has to change a little bit as well, to really start making a difference, because like you've just said, CK, things aren't even getting better, they're actually getting worse, and the discrimination and bullying that we're seeing within the workplaces isn't getting better. Sarah, I'm going to come to you then, Darren.
Thank you. I was just following up on what John was saying, that I think when events are put on and like flowing as well with CK around like the title, that it's a certain group that attend those events, and they're already generally members or allies, and it's just wanting to reach further, and how those people who don't know about it, who aren't aware, don't understand, how we can reach out to those other communities, those people.
And I think it's to reassure people, isn't it, Sarah? Like, it's like, oh, you can't get in if you're not a lesbian. Like, come on, you can come in. Don't have to pick a side here. We're very inclusive. And
Like
I
a
think
nightclub with somebody on the door checking your clothing before you're let in.
Yeah, you don't have short hair, you know, like.
yeah, you can't come in because you look straight. I mean, it's just, go on, couldn't you? So I think it's really important to tell people out there, when, like you said, John and Sarah, when there's events on, activities, it's inclusive. Please ask questions, be involved.
And there are 58 different types of gender, and there's 46 different types of sexuality. So, you know, it's such a spectrum in both areas that the boxes are limitless. You know, you don't have to put yourself in the box. And once people can just accept that people are allowed to be who they are without having that definition or label attached.
Absolutely. So, Laura?
There's just one little thing on just something that you said before, where you kind of pointed out rightly that things are getting worse in some ways, and kind of, you know, we're like seeing rises in homophobic hate crime, transphobic crime, blah blah blah. And I think that's a really important point to kind of push a little bit, because I think a lot of people don't know that, and I think a lot of people will see that, you know, oh, you know, you've got equal marriage now, and like legally, like everything's fine. Like, I think, you know, probably, I think most people would assume that things are better because there has been a lot of progress, but I think the creep that's sort of undoing that, you know, it maybe isn't that obvious if you're not part of the community or closely allied to it.
Absolutely. And I think if the evidence is out there with statistics, but even evidence of just us speaking now, like Darren, that you just said, the conversation you were having, that opened up someone to confide in you about their past. Certainly even just a tweet that I put out about this podcast, within 24 hours had hundreds of people, like over 100 people come with their story and their confidence, like that. This is a problem. This is something that we need to address, we want to address, but we need help doing that. Darren?
Yeah, I wanted to come back to something you said, Rachel, but also what Laura mentioned. I suppose kind of how things are changing, and for the negative right now. You know, society is more fractured at the moment than it has been for a very long time. But you mentioned, Rachel, about how things were 10, 15 years old, and it got me thinking about the importance of history and how things have changed over time. And as Pride is also a celebratory and recognition of the rainbow path that we walk on, that has been created by the people before us. You know, in the UK, homosexuality was only partially decriminalised in 1967, and how far things have moved. And, you know, this year was going to be the 50th year of the first ever Pride March. So it was 50 years ago that 150 men marched through London, and then it was 2 years later that it was the first ever Pride March in London. And I think recognition of success coupled with recognition of how far we've got to still go and how this is transient is a really important part of sharing that story and getting allies to understand why just because we've got equal marriage doesn't mean it's all okay.
So that's going to take me on to my kind of last set of questions or thoughts. And Martin, I'm going to come to you as the student now. Role models. how important are role models within our community? Are they important? Are they not? Is it, when I talk about AHP, I talk about, I talk about like the physio, the dietitian, the speech and language therapist, having someone that they can identify with.
Yeah, I think it's really important actually, having that role model where you have that safe person which you can see as somebody that you can aspire to. I think for me, I can see so many big physiotherapists that are not those cis straight people. They are, I have that role model. I have that, and I really appreciate that. But something tonight, I didn't actually know that those NHS badges were a thing. I've never heard of them before, and that's something that is going to be big for me, because I'm like, as someone that would be able to speak to somebody that's safe and happy to talk about, that's something big as well. And I was like, even something small like a role model on a badge is good, but having the conversations like this, I mean, this will create role models for students coming through as well. And I think this is important to just keep talking about it and having those people to aspire to and be like, look, you can be who you want to be and you can be brilliant. You're not a gay physiotherapist, you're a physiotherapist. You're not a lesbian OT, you're an OT, and that's all that matters. And you shouldn't need to be doing all of the coming out and all the rest of it. So I think role modeling is key.
Thank you. Now, I want to come and talk about LGBTQIA plus networks at work and how important are they. And Laura, I might come down to you for that. Is it important to have specific networks? Are we potentially creating divides? Or is it important for people to have that inclusive space, as CK would reference it, within the workplace, so people can talk honestly and openly and share concerns or experiences in that place?
Yeah, I think it's important to have sort of a space where you can do that. And I think if you are in a department or a team or a service that isn't particularly diverse, or in quite a, maybe in quite a small trust and things like that, then those networks might be the only sort of contacts you have from the community within your workplace, and sort of the only, maybe you find role models there as well, and kind of there's not always kind of obvious people in front of you, and it widens the net a little bit if you take it to a sort of like a trust level, and within that then you've got a space where you can share experiences like we're doing now, that I'm certainly enjoy this conversation, find it really helpful, and it's not always sort of available to kind of identify with other people, but also you can organize things and be part of that, raising awareness across things more widely. It's a lot of the things that we've talked about, they are so impossible to think of trying to do on your own, and even kind of with CK's unfortunate experience trying to raise an issue on your own and things like that, it is really, really difficult. So I think from that point of view, it does give you a bit more of a platform.
Absolutely. And John, do you want to come in there?
I think LGBTQI plus networks are important, but I think they need to kind of work out their way, because I have been part of many networks, and some are militant, some are really kind of all party, so therefore it's kind of an in and out sort of thing. I think that's one of the things that when you have a network, it needs to be open, or available or accessible in different ways. So it's not just that kind of, we're putting on lots of events, we're kind of militant about it and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we're the gang, yeah.
Because then people feel included and then people feel out. So I've taken a view after the few years of my role that actually it's more a symbol that there is something, and that people might engage and people might not, but at least they know it's there. So I think that is important for that reason.
I completely agree. I think within different organisations, there's going to be different needs. but not having one is not acceptable within, especially in an organisation such as a healthcare, NHS, or educational, and especially if you want to encourage inclusivity and diversity amongst your profession.
Yeah.
So I think, again, if there is people are listening to this and they don't have it, even if you're the manager and you define yourself, in a non-LGBTQI plus community, start it. It doesn't matter who started, it doesn't matter who's there. It's creating that environment and culture within your team to really make a difference and give people a voice that they might need, that they might not know is there, and give them the opportunity. And certainly the way I view networks as a manager is they'll be my go-to places. If I'm not sure about something, or I need to sense check something with a community or network of people, I will go to them and say, is this right? Have I got this right? Have I read this right? And I think as a manager, that's really important and really powerful. And that feeds higher up the chain. And if we do things right and we want to make system-wide change, that's the way you do it within an organisation. And the most inclusive organisations that exist have that culture and have that belief, and it's inbred through the society of the workplace. It's not just a token gesture of having something for the sake of it, the equality tick box exercise that we know exists. Go on, CK.
Yeah, I was just echoing what was said there. I feel that it's getting the balance of integration and segregation within a network, but mainly falls back on representation, and representation maybe of an individual or a group, or people feeling that they can approach whoever they want to approach to feel comfortable about what they need to discuss, and just remember that they're never alone within their team or their department.
Mm-hmm. And often people do feel very, very alone, and I think that's probably one of the reasons for the terrible mental health statistics we see from the surveys amongst the community, for sure, because of that feeling of division and divide and exclusion, and not being normal. I think so, absolutely. And the second network I really wanted to touch on was like an allied health professional network. So an LGBTQIA plus network. Is there any benefit of that? Is there any strength in that? Because I don't think one exists. I don't think there is an organisation. Maybe Tom, I'll come to you again. Sorry, you're getting all.
No. I'm not aware of one in London. I know we have obviously the AHP networks in London, but I'm not aware of an LGBT. I don't know if I can say it right or not. I don't know whether there is a full network. Would I find it beneficial? Again, it might come back to John's point that there is a symbol, there is someone to go to if you need to. Large cities can be a lonely place if you're new to that environment, and having a place where you can, a good opportunity to make friends and find allies might be useful. Yeah, it's worth a go.
I think
why not?
The difficult thing is, isn't it? It's the networks is only as good as the people that are in it and the drive that comes from with it, and it's keeping it going, it's keeping momentum, because otherwise it just ends up like really shit, and it's just a group of people, like you said, John. Just sat there, or it's piss up.
No one wants a shit network, do they?
So it may be, and this may come back from the podcast, like this is something to ask people, because there may be other podcasts that come from this, and maybe other conversation starters. It's happened with some of the other podcasts we've done. So this is down to you now, guys. Like, what do people want? What do people feel lacking? What do people need? There is, at organisational level within NHS England, there is work going on within the AHP NHSE leadership team. There is work going on. There is massive work needed across all inclusion and across all diversity. So this is our opportunity probably to have a voice and help direct some of that. Like you said, Martin, it's go to the people and ask what they want. And if we have a big, wider network, strategic network that just exists, that maybe meets once a year of this virtual world, anything's possible now. And then maybe that the people know where to come to if they need that guidance, that strategic level input across a whole professional group rather than just professional silos. Who wanted to come in there? I've seen some hands. Tom, I'll come to you first.
No, I was just gonna say. So something else about me is, so I have multiple sclerosis, and I find that actually having those wider national networks have been really beneficial for me to relate to people that have been going through something similar. So there is something about having a much wider network that creates pathways between people of different regions and people of different backgrounds. So yeah, I think, and also we could maybe use technology more. So we obviously have Microsoft Teams now, which no one ever heard of before COVID. So it would be good to utilize that new technology to try and create more networks.
Tom, I think you've just set yourself up there, mate. I think you just taught yourself into a job there. Welcome, Chair.
Thanks.
Darren, I'll come to you then, CK, if you wanted to say anything as well.
I'm just thinking about intersectionalities. I want to say the obvious. We have a very white panel here, and there are huge intersectionalities between different groups. For example, our BAME networks in the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, the LGBT network, and the Disability Network. And if we're talking about networks, how can these networks gain strength from each other as well? Because people will cross between different groups and have different experiences. And if there's strength in numbers, then, and people that are experiencing different forms of oppression and marginalisation, then it's important to share those experiences and stories and see similes in maybe different experiences of that marginalisation and oppression.
Absolutely, and we've just touched on BAME, LGBTQI plus individuals who have reached out to me, and there is absolutely a reason why they're massively underrepresented on this panel, just because of confidence and because of fear. And we know that, again, the statistics that we have absolutely evidence that that the community of people there's more prejudiced, they have multiple barriers. That is a white LGBTQI plus member that we wouldn't have. So I think that it's just a shout out and a recognition of that. But again, it's kind of like it's not our conversation to have, but it's really important to recognise that. And I completely agree with you, Darren. Let's get some allegiances within the networks for sure. CK, can I come to you?
Yeah. So I do some work on this outside of the healthcare as well, but I also talk to radiologists, neurologists, etc., who are trying to feel more comfortable dealing with trans and LGBTQIA plus patients, due to, again, being very much stuck in a system that isn't allowing them to openly maybe have an understanding of the patients that they're treating. And so back in July, my dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and from his pathway, I really noticed that it's all the leaflets, pamphlets, etc. It's a man's thing, it's a man's thing, it's a man's thing. But transgender females and non-binary males also get prostate cancer. So it took me over between here and New York quite a lot, and I the chief executive of the LGBT Cancer Network out there, who does a lot of work and representation within not only patients but also within staff as a representation, because gay men even going to prostate cancer appointments are being given the incorrect information on their treatment because they're being presumed as being heteronormative. So I do feel that, I know that New York's perhaps 10 years ahead in queerness and within gender as well, but I definitely think it's something that we need to consider within the UK for representation for staff members and for patients alike. That I don't know if you've looked at the LGBTQIA plus stats of patients who just lose confidence within the healthcare system because of how they're spoken to and how they feel misunderstood, not seen and not heard within who they are. So yeah, I definitely think it's worth considering if anybody else wants to get involved with that. And, you know, as you say, the stronger we are together, and it just opens a dialogue for patients as well who would like to have an input in their care pathways, and also for us within our experiences too.
Absolutely. And NHS England did produce a leaflet, and I'm not too sure actually that's really bad in terms of the emphasis on gender, but there is some patient information tools out there, but they're very few and far between. in the infographic type style products, which not everyone can actually relate to. So yeah, I completely agree with that. I don't think we're anywhere near to meeting that need.
And for breast cancer, it's very much aware that everybody has potential to have breast cancer. But when it comes to prostate cancer, there's no mention at all of trans females. So I do a lot of work with the Walnuts LGBTQIA plus cancer support group, prostate cancer support group. Walnut, there's only one based in the whole of South East England. But yeah, it's just more awareness out there, and we have to be representative of our own belief systems and our own past as well, and paving the way for others to come after us too.
And that's definitely our role as AHPs, 100%. So yeah, that's a great conversation starter. Darren?
I want to give a shout out on the back of that to 5016 Street that are currently doing a 3-year trial, which is a brand new NHS England funded gender identity clinic, and a brand new model for that, which is that it's not the old model of gender identity clinic. It's linked in with health and sexual health. And one of the things that's commissioned with that is a full-time speech and language therapist specifically for voice therapy. So huge shout out to that service, which is a first in the United Kingdom.
And what a lovely positive thing to finish on, Darren. So I really hope that everyone has enjoyed this podcast, and I really don't know where this is going to go. I'm really grateful for the panel for all their input and advice, and for keeping it as sensible as we possibly could. I'm going to go around and give everyone the opportunity to have the last word here, because I don't want it to be mine. So I'll start with you, Darren. Have you got anything you'd like to add or summarise?
Oh God, thank you. Do you know what? I was really nervous about this, and I kind of expected it to be really emotional, and maybe I'm just emotionally labile at the minute because of COVID, but I haven't teared up, so thanks. This has been really enjoyable.
Thanks, Darren. Tom?
Hi, I just wanted to say I've enjoyed it as well. I think it's been eye-opening for me, and I've enjoyed listening to everyone's perspective, other perspectives, and yeah, I'm looking forward to more podcasts in the future.
Oh, you've set yourself up there, Tom, again. You've 2 things now. There's 2 promises.
Busy.
Sarah?
Just really want to say that this has been my first public forum speaking out about anything gay, lesbian, rainbow, and how positive it's been. So really want to thank you all for this space, and how privileged I feel for hearing the stories, and I feel there's a lot of hope to go on to now, to leave with.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely, Sarah. CK?
Yeah, thank you very much for all the beautiful shares and vulnerability around the room. I'm very grateful to have been here as well, and just to be able to be heard and represented within the LGBTQI+ community, within sexuality and gender. So thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Laura?
Yeah, I'm not sure I've got much else to add to what everyone else has said. I was also really nervous, and also I've really enjoyed it, and thank you all for sharing your time and your experiences. And yeah, it's definitely, if anyone else sort of is seeing opportunities like these and is very nervous, I'm really glad that I did it, and I'm going to take quite a lot of confidence away from it, and I'd encourage people to consider it, even if it is a little bit terrifying.
Love that, Laura. Love it. Martin?
I think I can just echo what everyone else has been saying. Thank you so much for organising this, Rachel. I think it's been really positive to be able to share experiences and have this conversation, which people can find quite awkward sometimes. And it's actually really nice to see how positive and how welcoming this kind of conversation can be. So thank you very much for organising it. And I'm sorry if I've appeared a bit nervous. This has been quite a big thing for me as well. So.
Oh, no, you haven't been nervous. You've been amazing. Well done. John?
And I just want to say happy Pride Month, everyone in the Zoom.
Right, well, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.